The unseen horror of the London Necropolis Railway, the train that carried the dead. Victorian Gothic history in the heart of Victorian London. A city choking on its own progress and its own dead. A silent, chilling solution was born. It was a railway line unlike any other. A spectral artery that didn't carry commuters or cargo, but something far more macabre. This is the story of the London Necropolis Railway, the train that carried the dead. A Gothic tale of necessity, innovation, and an unseen horror that haunted its tracks. Imagine, if you will, the fog-drenched streets of the 1850s. The air thick with the stench of coal smoke and something far more sinister. The overwhelming miasma of death. London was in the grip of a terrifying crisis. Its ancient churchyards and parish burial grounds were overflowing, quite literally. The city's population had exploded, and so too had its death toll. Graveyards, once sacred and serene, had become grotesque pits of putrefaction. Bones were unearthed to make way for new arrivals. Coffins were stacked precariously in shallow graves, and the very soil was saturated with human remains. The public health implications were dire. Cholera outbreaks, believed to be spread by the miasma or foul air rising from these corrupted grounds, swept through the city, claiming tens of thousands of lives. The living were being poisoned by the dead. Something had to be done. The city's greatest minds wrestled with their problem, but it was a pair of radical thinkers, Sir Richard Brune and Robert Spry, who proposed a solution so audacious, so utterly Victorian in its ambition and its chilling practicality that it seemed torn from the pages of a Gothic novel. Their vision was not for a new cemetery within the city's confines, but for a vast, purpose-built necropolis, a veritable city of the dead, far out in the peaceful countryside of Surrey. And how would London's deceased citizens and their grieving families reach this final resting place? By their own dedicated funereal railway. Thus, the London Necropolis and National Mausoleum Company was born. In 1854, this grim vision became a reality. A dedicated station was constructed at 120 1 Westminster Bridge Road, a stone's throw from a bustling Waterloo station, yet a world apart in its purpose. This wasn't a place of hurried goodbyes and exciting journeys. It was a terminus of sorrow, a gateway to the afterlife. The architecture itself was designed to be solemn and respectful, but one can only imagine the oppressive atmosphere that clung to its platforms. This station was ingeniously segregated. There was a private entrance and waiting rooms for the first-class mourners, who could afford a more comfortable, dignified passage to their grief. Then there were the second and third-class entrances for the common folk, a stark reflection of the rigid class structure that followed Londoners even into death. Separate platforms, separate waiting areas, separate tickets, one for the leaving, and one for the coffin. The trains themselves were a marvel of macabre engineering. Carriages were specially designed, with compartments for the living mourners and separate, secure sections for the caskets. The funeral carriages, or hearses, were windowless and dark, ensuring the dead traveled with a somber privacy. First-class coffins traveled in more ornate sections, while third-class caskets were often loaded together, a final, silent congregation. The schedule was as regular as any commuter line, with a train departing London each morning, a one-way journey for its silent passengers. Imagine the scene. A grieving family, clad in black, gathers on the platform. The air is heavy with the scent of lilies and the hiss of steam from the waiting locomotive. Porters, in solemn uniform, respectfully load a coffin onto the train. The whistle shrieks, a mournful cry that cuts through the city's din, and the train slowly pulls away. It's a journey of just over 20 miles to Brookwood Cemetery, the vast necropolis carved out of the Surrey heathland. But for those on board, it must have felt like a journey to another world. The train would chug through the familiar landscape of South London, passing factories and tenement buildings, before the city gave way to green fields and open sky. For the mourners, this slow transition from the grimy, chaotic city to the tranquil countryside was a deliberate part of the experience, a psychological buffer between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. Upon arrival at Brookwood, the train would pull into one of two dedicated stations within the cemetery itself. North Station for the nonconformists and South Station for the Anglicans. Even in this final city, segregation was maintained. From there, a horse-drawn hearse would complete the final leg of that journey to the graveside. The scale of Brookwood was staggering, designed to hold every person who would die in London for centuries to come. It was the largest cemetery in the world at the time. It had its own chapels, its own masons, and even its own pubs for the weary mourners and grave diggers. It was a self-contained world built around the singular industry of death. For nearly a century, the London Necropolis Railway fulfilled its solemn duty. It transported hundreds of thousands of London's dead, from the wealthiest aristocrats to the poorest paupers, providing a dignified and sanitary alternative to the city's overflowing graveyards. It carried soldiers from the world wars to their final resting places in dedicated military plots. It became a quiet, accepted, yet profoundly eerie part of London life. But the world was changing. The advent of motorized hearses in the 20th century began to offer a more direct, private alternative to the funeral train. The railway, once a symbol of modern efficiency, started to seem like a relic of a bygone era. The number of passengers, both living and dead, began to dwindle. The final, fatal blow came not from progress, but from the sky. On the night of April 16, 1941, during the height of the Blitz, a German air raid struck London. The Necropolis station at Westminster Bridge Road took a direct hit. The platforms, the waiting rooms, the archways that had seen so much sorrow were reduced to a smoldering ruin. The station was never rebuilt. The age of the death train was over. The tracks leading into Brookwood Cemetery were eventually pulled up, and the London terminus was demolished, erased from the city's map. Today, almost no physical trace of the London station remains. A modern office building stands where the gateway to the afterlife once was. Its daily occupants likely unaware of the spectral journeys that began beneath their feet. But at Brookwood, the ghosts of the railway linger. The old station platforms, now overgrown with weeds and moss, can still be found by those who know where to look. They stand as silent monuments to a unique and chilling chapter in London's history. The story of the London Necropolis Railway is more than just a creepy historical fact. It's a testament to Victorian ingenuity in the face of a terrifying crisis. It's a Gothic horror story written in iron and steam, a macabre reflection of a society obsessed with death, class, and progress. It reminds us that beneath the surface of our modern city lie forgotten stories, hidden histories, and the faint, ghostly echo of a train that carried the dead. If you found this journey into London's macabre past as fascinating as I did, please show your support. It helps us to continue unearthing these eerie historical tales for you. And if you have any thoughts or know of other forgotten histories, please share them in the comments below. We love reading your insights and stories. Finally, if you don't want to miss our next exploration into the Gothic and the mysterious, make sure you subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell.